Hi, I'm Peggy Farren, and you are watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. Welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about memory cards, hard drives, backing up your photos with Joe Fitzpatrick. And speaking of Joe Fitzpatrick, Joe and I put together a really good, if I do say so myself, a really good guidebook for this area. It's called Florida Photo Spots, Naples and Collier County, and we include the Western Everglades. We've got the addresses and the coordinates of the best photo spots in this area, along with the type of photography that it's good for. Is it good for portrait photography, macro photography, landscapes, whatever type of photography it's good for, we list it. We list the best time of day, best time of year, everything. It's a really, really complete guidebook to this area, so that you can find it on Amazon, Florida Photo Spots. You could just do a search for Florida Photo Spots and it'll come up. If you can't remember that, type in my name, Peggy Farren, type in Joe Fitzpatrick, and it will come up in Amazon.com. It's available both as an ebook or as a soft cover book. So hopefully you will enjoy our guidebook. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, and please subscribe to our podcast. And better yet, in addition to subscribing, please leave us a review on iTunes. That helps us so much. The better the reviews and the more reviews, the better that iTunes, positions us so that we can come to a larger audience. We're trying really hard to give you good content on photography. It's a teaching show, so you're going to learn something in every show. And then, of course, our motto at Understand Photography is we simplify the technical. So let's get on to the show. Our guest today is Understand Photography's own technical specialist, Joe Fitzpatrick. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Peggy. Glad to be here on this side of the camera.
I know. Usually you're over there.
Usually I'm back there where Heather is today.
Now you can yap away instead of just keeping your mouth shut.
I don't have to switch cameras, and I don't have to hold back on my comments.
All right, so we're going to talk about memory cards. I think memory cards are confusing to a lot of people. Like, which one do I buy? Here's one that's 32 gig for $12.99. Here's one that's 32 gig for $129.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So how many types of memory cards are there?
Well, when I first started to look at this, everybody's saying, there's only two kinds. There's CF cards and there's SD cards, right? And I started to look into it. We have CF cards. We have CFast cards. We have CF Express cards. We have XQD cards. We have SD cards in 5 different flavors. And then we have micro SD cards. Wow. All used by cameras today. I'm not talking about something that was 10 years ago,
right,
but they're all in current use.
Yeah, because remember they had memory sticks back in the day?
Well, Sony had the memory sticks. They had that format. They were trying to compete with the SD and the CF cards, and
they
obviously
lost.
They lost. But they came up with the one format, the XQD, is partially a Sony format.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
that's being replaced.
What's the most popular right now?
Well, today the most popular form factor would be an SD card.
Okay.
That's in the majority of things, and the nice thing about that, it's much smaller than the CF cards were. You don't have those little pins inside the device to bend and then have to pay a fortune to have it repaired. So the SD card is the most popular, and that comes in a whole bunch of different speeds.
Okay.
But that's the most popular. And then there's the micro SD.
And then goes to a GoPro, right?
Yeah, and micro SD is a smaller, that has the same kind of ratings.
Oh, that goes in the phones, too.
They use them in cell phones. They use them in the GoPros. They use them in the drones. Anything where you're really small card. And you can also, for them, they have a carrier you put them in so they can go in a slot designed for a regular SD card.
Yeah, I have some of those.
Yeah, so I have a few of them too.
Okay.
But they're kind of a specialty thing. Cell phone cameras, GoPros, drones, that kind of thing.
All right, so what do you want to talk about first?
Well, let's talk about the SD cards first, because that's what most people have.
Okay.
When I'm talking about SD cards, and I'll talk about the different ratings and classes, the exact same things apply for the micro SD cards.
Okay.
So whatever that number is on a regular SD card, you'll find the same thing on the micro.
Okay.
Okay. So let's talk about the SD cards. The first one, you're going to see a lot of different numbers on them. The first big number you see is always something like 95 megabytes a second, or 300 megabytes a second, or 80 megabytes a second. That's the.
And it doesn't say that though. It says 95 MB
yeah, 95,
slash S.
Yeah, 95 MB, capital MB slash S,
Okay.
which is different than small MB.
Oh.
Okay, capital MB is megabytes, small MB is megabits. There's
Okay.
8 bits in a byte.
All right. Okay.
So you're looking at
So
the
we're looking
rating.
at capitals in
We're
this
looking
case.
at capitals. That rating there could be either a read speed or a write speed, and that's determined by the manufacturer. And they all may rate them a little differently and use different kind of formulas. So that's the manufacturer's bragging speed.
So that's not a real speed.
Well, it is a real speed. If it's a major manufacturer, SanDisk or Lexar, it's probably pretty close.
But we don't know if it's a read or write speed.
Well, typically they give you the read speed because it's a little faster than the write speed. So usually you're seeing the read speed on them. Sometimes they'll tell you it's both. But you really have to go and look at the manufacturer's website and go into the specs on the card.
Okay, so a big number is good, but it's really not a real number.
It's
We
not
don't
a real,
really
you're going to
know.
see that in a minute, how different it is from the standard that the SDA Association makes.
Okay.
And first of all, so the main cards you have, they have a bus speed, which is what they do when they connect internally and how they would connect with your computer. Okay, and on that card, that'll be a number. It'll be SD, SC, or SDHC, or SDXC, or SDUC.
Okay.
And you'll find that it has a fancy looking SD, and then underneath it it'll say SC or HC or whatever.
And what do all those?
They're a speed rating. Okay, they're the different classes. Now, most of these cards are backwards compatible, except for the very first ones. The first format was SDSC, and something that's been designed for that. And we're talking pretty old now. We're talking 10, 12 years ago. They probably can't take the newer cards, the SDHC and what have you, because they changed something a little bit.
So if you have an old camera that took an SD
SC.
SC,
Yeah.
you probably can't use a new SD card in it.
Exactly.
Okay, got it. All right.
But
so,
anything from the SDHC up, you can.
and what's the latest one?
The latest one is, let me just look at that so I make sure I have my numbers right.
Yeah, because
the
already we
latest
got a lot
one-
of numbers and
Yeah.
letters in this
Okay,
show.
the latest one is the SDUC.
And would that be the best one?
Well, if you have something that's designed for it, yes. But
Okay.
there's a catch there. The two latest formats, and we'll get into another bus speed, but the latest ones have 2 rows of pins on the back. So if you put them in an older device where they only see the 1 row of pins, they will not perform very fast.
They'll still work though.
They'll work, but they may not be as fast as a card designed without the pins. They may actually be slower. So you may be spending $100 and some on this 32 gig card and have it not perform like your $13 one.
Ah, I see.
Okay, so you want to make sure, really look at what the manufacturer says in his specs, whether it's HC or XC or UC or whatever, and that's pretty much what you should stick to.
Whatever your camera.
Whatever the camera, whatever your
Okay.
camera or whatever
Whatever
you put
they
in.
say to put in there, that's what you should put in
as
there.
far as that goes.
Okay.
You could probably go up one, but the newest ones you got to watch.
Okay.
Okay, that's the first rating system. The next one is, next to that, there's going to be a Roman numeral.
Now, let me just say,
Yeah.
if you are looking at an SD card, you're kind of just looking at this sequentially. You're going through the numbers sequentially right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
go
I'm
ahead.
just trying to
like
go
if,
through
for those
each
of us
thing.
who can, who are
Yeah.
watching the video, he's just kind of going
Right.
left
Now,
to right like we would read.
Well, I'm going left to right on a SanDisk card, but on another card they may have moved the stuff around.
Okay.
Typically this SDHC will be towards the upper right-hand corner in those ratings. The 95 bytes a second, that may be down the bottom or something like
Okay,
that.
okay.
But typically all these other ratings are more in the upper right-hand quadrant of the card.
Okay, all right, so let's go back to this number
So let's
here.
go, the next number you're going to see is a Roman numeral. It'll either be the Roman numeral 1 or the Roman numeral 2. Okay. That's a classification. The ones with the 2 are those ones with the double row of contacts.
Okay, so you have to make sure you have a camera that will accept those.
Most of the cameras on the market today need the Roman numeral 1 card. Okay, that's the most common thing. So it's very new cameras, and they would be high-end cameras that would have the 2. Okay, so typically you're going to look for one that has a Roman numeral 1 on it. So that's the next thing to look for. From there, you're going to look, and below that is going to be the speed class of the card. Now, they started back in the day, no classes at all, and then they went to a number. It looks like a letter C with a number inside it. A 2, a 4, a 6, an 8, or a 10. Top number is 10. That's the speed that's the sustained write speed in megabytes a second.
And write speed's the most important speed.
Write speed is the most important.
Because that's when you take the picture, it's writing to the card.
Exactly.
Because you can look at it and read it later.
Yeah.
There's no rush to read it, but there's a rush to write it because you might be wanting to take a bunch of pictures in a row.
And this is a sequential write speed on a clean card. Newly formatted where it doesn't have to search where it's putting the pictures.
All right, so class 10
is 10 megabytes a second.
And is that the speed that's the fastest speed available now?
No. That was the fastest of the C rating cards. They got the 10 megabytes and they decided to test a little differently how they did it. The 2 to 10 was, I think they called it a sequential write. So it had a write in sequence, but there could be breaks, I believe is what it was. Okay, and then they went to the next thing, the UHS classes. Okay, and they are numbers either a 1 or a 3. And again, 1, it means 10 megabytes a second. 3 means 30 megabytes a second. But that's a sustained write speed.
So that's pretty fast.
In other words, it can write the entire card at a minimum. These are minimum numbers, not maximum. That's why there's such a big difference between the 30 and the 95.
You mean big difference in price?
Well, no, on the same card. I mean, we're looking at a card, we're talking about a card, a typical SanDisk card may be a U3, but it may say 95 megabytes a second, okay? Like the one in the example we were showing. So the 30 is a minimum sustained speed done under the testing procedure of the SD Association. The 95 is how much SanDisk claims is better than that. So in other words, it'll do at least 30, but maybe in short burst,
it'll do 95.
It'll do 95.
I see.
Okay, so that you have there. So that's
pretty much. But if you got a 3, if you're just looking at that class number, the little ups, it's like a U with a number in it.
With a number 3 inside it.
But the old slow version would be the same number, it's just it would be a different letters. Is that what you're saying to me?
Well, originally the only thing you used to see on a card was the C with the 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10 in it.
Okay, and I think it looks like a U.
Well, this.
Okay. So what's this one? Did we skip that one?
That's the U. That's the new. No, that's the one we're talking about now. But before that, first the cards only had a C on there. C and 2, 4, 6, 8, or 10. Then after 10, they went to a faster format.
And that's the one in the U.
And then they went to the number with the U.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you could have a 3 that's inside the C.
Yeah. That means...
That's an older card, probably.
That's an older card.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have, if you have a 3 inside the U, then it's fast.
Yes.
It's very fast. It's the fastest you can get.
Well, the 3 is as fast as they are rating them now. The 3 is the top class right now until they come out with another class. But there's another rating they give it too. Because they recognize that video can need even faster cards, because if you're recording a video at 30 frames a second, 1080p, It's a huge amount of data that you're putting in the pipe to the card. I mean, gigantic amount. How much depends on the compression you're using. And the different compressions that the camera uses affect it too. So they also have a video rating. And that, on the newer cards, you'll see a V followed by a 30, a 60, or a 90.
Okay.
So the fastest card now would say a V90 on there.
So do most SD cards have a V on there?
No.
Only the super high-speed ones?
The super high-speed ones, you'll see a V30.
And those are more expensive?
Yeah, the V30 is about the fastest you're going to see in the SDHC cards, the single row of pins.
Okay.
To get faster than that, then you need that second row to pump more data into the card and out of the card. And that's going to have a V60 or a V90 on it.
But you're going to have a newer video camera to do that.
You're going to have a newer video camera to take advantage of that, yeah.
Okay.
And the price jumps drastically.
Okay.
The typical card, 95 megabytes a second, like the ones you just bought. They're 95 or 90 megabytes, and they'll be rated with a U3, C10, V30, and they're going to be 15 or 20 bucks a card.
Okay.
To get that Roman numeral 2 on there and a V60, you're talking over $100.
Wow.
Of course, they're not doing 95 megabytes a second. They're doing 400 or 350 megabytes a second. So there's a huge difference in speed. Now, whether your camera or your reader can take advantage of it,
yeah.
who knows?
Okay.
So you really don't want to go too much faster than what the camera was designed for.
Okay.
Because you could put a super fast card in, but the camera's only designed to pump the data out so fast.
Right.
So, and that's your bottleneck. Now, it might pay you, if you got a huge card and a gazillion images on it, and you have a fast reader on your computer that's designed for the faster card, it can get the data off the card and into your computer much faster.
Okay.
You know, it can be a minute or two rather than 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
You know, if you have the right kind of reader for it.
Yeah.
So when you're doing with the higher speed cards, you also want to get a high speed reader to take advantage of it, offloading and uploading to your camera.
And most computers now come with an SD card reader.
Yeah.
But they're not going to be the high-speed ones.
No.
So you can get
I'd be
one.
surprised. They usually don't even tell you what they are. You know?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
So you can get a detachable reader that plugs into your USB port, and that could be faster.
Lexar makes a really good one, USB 3.0 one. That's not for the newest cards now. I think now they've come out with one that is for the newer cards, one that takes SD cards only, where the standard Lexar one that most pros use takes it either SD or CF cards.
Yeah, that's what I think mine is.
And that's a USB 3.0, yeah.
Okay.
That's a fast reader for those kind of cards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
a lot of stuff there.
let's summarize. So you know me, you made my head spin because of all the numbers and everything.
Yeah.
Just bottom line it for me.
Okay.
I want to go buy a new card. I know, and let's just talk about this real fast. I personally don't want anything bigger than 32 gig.
Right.
Why is that?
Well,
I'm telling you what I want and asking you to tell me why.
It depends on the use case. Now, we're assuming you're shooting RAW. So the first thing you want to look at is how big's your sensor? You know, are you talking, most cameras are 20, 25 megapixels. But then you get the high-end pro cameras or some of them, and they're 50 megapixels. So it's taking up twice as much real estate. So if you needed a 32 for the 20 or 25, you need a 64 to get the same amount of pictures on it.
But I have the 25 megapixels or whatever.
So a 32
it's 1,000
is
pictures.
giving you 1,000 pictures
That's
and more,
a lot
and that's
of
fine.
pictures.
Yeah.
When we first went digital, we had the little cards. Of course, they were expensive back then. But we were used to doing 24 to 36 pictures per roll of film. Yeah. So, and it's still, even though now I'm still uncomfortable doing a professional job with only one SD card.
Yeah.
Now, this is somewhere where Canon falls, in my opinion, because I am a Canon shooter. I think there's only one professional Canon camera that has 2 slots, 2 memory cards.
The fives
There are 2 of them?
The fives do, and the 1DXs do, yeah.
Okay.
Their
But
new
most
mirrorless,
of them,
their new mirrorless does not.
most of them just have 1 card.
1 card slot, yeah.
So if something happens to that card, you're screwed.
Yeah.
So I shoot with 2 cameras just in case, you know, because I don't want to lose. But I also don't use the big cards because if I lose that card, at least I only lost 1 job or whatever.
Yeah.
So unless, you know, I think people who go on vacation, it might be a good idea to have a bigger card.
Yeah.
Because it's not that much more money to go from 32 to 64.
No, not a lot, no.
All right, so bottom line, what am I going to look for? I'm
Okay,
not really going to look.
Just to go back to the card though for a minute, 32 is fine for you if you're taking still photos.
Oh,
But if you're going to start taking video, you better have a 64 in there.
Yeah, how long will 64 be?
I'd have to look up the time.
Okay.
It depends on, are you 1080p or you're 4K or you're
Okay.
720 or you're 30 frames a
Yeah,
second
yeah,
or whatever.
okay.
But you go through megabytes real fast when you're doing a lot of video. So in that case, 64 would be better, which is what I do. I have 64s for video and I have 32s for my stills.
Okay.
For the same philosophy as you, I don't want to put too many thing on the 1 card. And if it's important, if it's a single card slot, you do the same thing. I do the same. What you were doing is what I used to do with film. I always shot with 2 films, and I take more or less the same shots with both, so I always had backup, you know. And
All right, so let's just
okay,
wrap
summary.
this up.
Summary, if you're going to buy a card today, and it's for a fairly modern camera, but not like a pro-level $5,000 camera.
But like for me, like I have, you know, my main go-to camera
if
for
you-
event photography is a 6D.
Yeah,
That's
if you have
it's a professional camera, but it's the lowest end
Right.
professional
Yeah.
that Canon
So
makes.
you have a prosumer camera is what they call it. It's kind of between a pro and that. For something like that, anything that has SDHC, the numeral 1, and the U3 on it is more than enough.
Okay.
Okay.
So the U, but basically the U3 is the main thing I'm looking for. If I can only remember one thing, which is pretty typical of me.
If you remember one thing, remember the U3.
The U3.
If you got a U3, that your camera is going to be able to take full advantage and do what it needs to do with that card.
Okay.
Okay.
And again, the reason for speed is
when you're taking stills, you can only take so many stills at a time before it has to unload them from the camera's buffer into the memory card, and then you come to a dead halt while it
I
does
mean,
that.
my camera actually says, what does it say? I forget, but it makes me wait sometimes. I go too fast for the camera, sometimes, or not the camera, but the card.
And then it slows down because it can't get them out of
it like processing,
Yeah.
or I don't think that's what it says.
Well, it's just offloading them from the. There's an internal memory in the camera that's very fast, and that's what it shoots to. And then from there, that tries to put them and write them to the card.
Now, how long do these cards last?
Well, the cards, the little transistors that are in there that are basically for each thing. The manufacturers of the transistors claim they last anywhere from 500 to 3,000 erase write cycles.
Okay, so you're going to fill it up, erase it, and by erase you mean format the card?
Well, they say erase.
But that's what we want them to do. We want them to format the card.
well, that's where you can get away, because typically, even when we format, we're not erasing the card.
That's a good point.
We're not doing a low-level format. We're just erasing the fat table, the directory of where the stuff is. So we're not physically erasing it. So what we're doing, basically, you could double that number, because all we're doing is writing over something. We're not erasing it first and writing.
Okay.
So if that's the case, anywhere from 1,000 cycles to 6,000 cycles.
And how do you know they go bad?
They start to let you know, because typically they don't. Typically with those kind of cards, you don't get a total failure. okay? You can. But when the memory itself starts to go, you get errors. So you'll get a picture and it might have some funky colors in it, or because those particular individual sites aren't working right.
So what do?
You buy a new card.
You
and
throw it away, right?
And it does police itself. There's actually inside the card, it's checking itself all the time and blocking off ones it sees going bad. So you'd see the capacity go down too, but it'd be tough to see that. Typically, if you start to see the card doing something funky or corrupting a picture or two, you could reformat it and it might work again, but you're crazy if you do. As soon as you see a problem with the card, get the stuff on that card off of it onto your computer and throw that card in the trash and get a new one.
I am with you. Now,
Yeah.
what if you took some pictures, they're beautiful pictures, and then you put the card into your reader in the computer and it says no data or can't read the card. Then you put it back in your camera, puts a question mark. What are you going to do? Because you have good pictures on that card.
Well, you get some software that'll attempt to recover the pictures on the card in the computer. All right, you put it back in the computer, use recovery software. Some of the makers give you a free software for a year when you buy their card. Others you can buy, there's freeware software recovery programs. I use one called Recuva, R-E-C-U-V-A. It's freeware, and it works great. I haven't seen, I've done it more for other people where they've need something recovered, and I've done it, and it's been successful in all but one or two cases. In those cases there, nothing else got it back either.
Yeah.
It was just beyond it. The card can go bad. The actual thing in there that assigns where it writes on the card and keeps track of all this stuff, if that goes bad, then the whole card's junk and there's nothing you can do about it.
Okay.
And then when that happens, that doesn't give you a warning. It just works and then doesn't work, and
I know.
That's not the typical kind of failure, though.
Okay. I use cardrecovery.com. I think it was $30 for that software.
Well, Recuva's cheaper.
Yeah, it sure is. Free.
Free works. The only thing I ever found weird with that is sometimes when it recovers raw files, it names them all as TIFFs instead of CR2 or NEF. It names them as TIFFs. So what you have to do is you then have to go in and do a global renaming the extension, to get them to work right.
Okay.
But that's just an odd behavior.
All right. And now, because we run a training center, we have people call us kind of regularly that can't find their cards aren't working for one reason or another, and sometimes they formatted the card. Now we teach them to format the card. Why should they format the card?
Well, when you reformat the card, you're wiping the slate clean.
But you just said 2 minutes ago that formatting did not do that.
Well, you're wiping the directory, the FAT table, clean.
Okay.
So you're starting with 0. Otherwise, it's keeping track of sectors and stuff like that. So it resets the whole thing.
So if
you're just erasing, you're erasing a thing at a time, and the FAT table's got to do all this stuff. Where the other way, you're just getting rid of the whole thing at once.
So your card will last longer if you format it. Maybe? No.
No. It's
What's the benefit of formatting then?
The benefit of formatting is it's a cleaner. It cleans off the directory better, so that it'll start writing sequentially to the card, which will make the card faster.
Okay.
Okay.
And what the Lexar lady told me was, because I had a card that started getting all the green computer gobbledygook in it, and she said, your card's not bad, you just need to format it. Now that was back in the days when those 256 megabytes were $150 for a card.
Well, it could be.
And she was right.
Yeah.
She was right. I formatted. I never had another problem
Yeah.
with that card. In fact, I still have a lot of those CF cards because I got that one old camera that's that I converted into infrared, and I still use some cards that I bought in 2001.
Oh, I got an older card than that.
You do?
Yeah, I had a. I forget why, but I had to take something to somebody on an SD card for their computer. It was just a small file, you know. It wasn't even a picture. It was just a document. It was fairly small. No, it might have been a JPEG, just one JPEG. So I grabbed this card out of the pile, and it said 2 on it, and I just stuck it into the computer, and I went to download to it, and it said the card was too small. It was one JPEG. I'm saying the card's too small, and I pulled the card out, and it wasn't 2 megabytes. It was 2 gigabytes.
You mean the other way around?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I said that. It wasn't 2 gigs. It was 2 megabytes. It was from one of my first PowerShot cameras where the JPEGs
I never knew they made them that small.
Yeah, it was.
2 megabytes.
It was one. Remember when they gave you a card with the camera, and it was tiny? It was one of them. But that's what it was. I didn't even think. I saw 2, and I didn't even think. Here it was megabytes. No wonder it wouldn't fit.
That's amazing.
Yeah, isn't that weird? Yeah.
Wow, you should frame that. That's like a...
I kept it. I didn't throw it out because I think it's interesting that something that tiny, you know.
Now, here is, in my opinion, a problem, but let me hear your take on this. We have a lot of customers who travel extensively, right? And they will buy those huge cards, 128 gigabytes or whatever. And they take all their Africa pictures there. When they go to Africa, they use this one card, and then they just store the card, and that's their backup. Well, how do you feel about using cards for long-term storage?
Well, you know, and we can talk about that too when we're talking about backing up a little bit, but basically the cards don't hold the data forever. In point of fact, they can, what happens is the data is being stored as an electrical charge inside the card. For every bit in there, there's an electrical charge.
Okay.
And it's insulated from everything around it. Well, the insulators aren't perfect. And the more you write and read from the card, the more the insulator breaks down.
Okay.
And as the insulator breaks down, the charge that's in it can be dissipated out of the card, meaning it's no longer charged, meaning there's no longer any information. The people that make the actual electronics in the card say that can be anywhere from as little as a year to maybe as long as 10 years.
Oh boy.
So if you have a card sitting there just on the shelf, it can, magically everything can just go away inside it from the leakage through the insulation around each of the data sites.
Wow. Yeah, so that is not the best way to store your images.
No, absolutely not, because it's just a question. And the more you've used the card, the more that insulation. Yeah, so a brand new card might last you 7 years, 10 years maybe. But if a heavily used card can go in a year, you know, it's crazy.
Wow.
That also applies to SSD drives. Because
solid state drives.
They use exactly the same technology.
Oh, interesting.
So, but they have a way around it. As long as you keep them powered up, they have a routine that goes through and pumps up the charge on everything, so they'll last longer. So an SSD drive, either internal or external, needs to be kept powered up.
So, like, I just had my computer crashed, what, 2-3 weeks ago, and I've got it now. I've got a solid state
drive in it. Yeah.
Drive in there, SSD drive. So, should I not be turning off my computer every night?
Well, you don't have to keep it powered on 24/7, but you can't go and put it on a shelf for a month.
Well, it's an internal hard drive.
Well, I mean, in other words, you need to run that computer weekly or monthly, or
no problem there.
Yeah, but I mean, that's, you know, it's more of a problem. In other words, if you're using the computer regularly, it's a non-issue.
Okay.
Because it's going to keep track of this stuff.
But it shouldn't.
It's also going to
if I had portable hard drives, don't buy a solid state.
No, if you want it for long-term storage, in other words, you're going to back up to it, and you're going to put it on a shelf somewhere, and your computer goes dead 2 years from now, and you go to get that, there's liable to be nothing on it because the charge leaked away.
You want to buy a traditional hard drive?
Yeah, for backing up, you want to buy a traditional hard drive. But even them, they need to be run every once in a while too, because they're mechanical and they have grease or oil inside, and if they sit there too long, that stuff might start to congeal or stick or whatever, and then you plug it in and you can't get it to run. You know, you hear it trying to run and it doesn't run because it's sat too long. So they should be exercised every once in a while.
Good to know, because I have, you know how many hard drives? I can't even, I don't even have a clue
every
on how many hard drives I have.
Every once in a while you ought to plug them in and just let it run a little bit. Now they're magnetic, and in time the magnetic charge can go too. And there again, I don't know, 10, 20 years.
So what do you suggest I do? Okay, so, I mean, I don't even know if I need all this, but you know, I started my business in 2001.
Right.
And I've got old hard drives, because I've always used separate hard drives to store my photos as one of the two ways I back them up. But that's the easiest way to get them. So so these old ones, should I just get a new hard drive and transfer the information over to them?
Well, just run them. As long as they're firing up and running, you're okay. You know, but you may want to do that from a standpoint of taking up less space, because your old hard drives were probably,
and you got a plug, and you got this plug, you got two plugs.
They were probably all of 512 megabytes or you know, or gigabytes rather, 512 gigs. And they're big, and now you can buy one. The last ones I bought, and they weren't the small form factor, they were the bigger ones. They're 8 terabytes. You know, so I can put a whole bunch on that.
I know, but I don't think I would throw the old ones away, even if I backed them up.
Well, no, I would keep them, but
so space-wise, they'd still take up the space.
Right now, I'm using a couple 2 8-terabyte drives as backups.
But I could probably back every single thing I have on one 8
terabyte.
On
one of them. And if you wanted to get rid of the other ones.
How many years have I been in business? 17 years.
Yeah. And you have to watch too, over the course of time, the connections between the computer and the drives have changed. You know, you're USB 3.0 now. You were USB 2. If you're on a Mac now, it's a Thunderbolt. Before that, it was something else. And as you change computers, you may find that your new computer, you can't plug the old drive into.
Okay.
Right? I mean, because we've changed
so
over
it's
the
a good
course of
idea
time.
If you have old storage like me
Yeah.
to go through that and restore it.
Yeah, restore it. You should do that every once in a while, because the media is changing. The way it reads is changing. You know, the newer ones have a different file system than the older ones, and at some point they probably won't read the old ones anymore.
And it's not that hard to do, because you just plug them both into your computer and you just move them from one to the other. So I'm going to do that. Thank you for the good advice. Now what's a RAID drive? RAID.
Okay. You know what we didn't do? We didn't talk about CF card ratings and all that stuff.
I know. I know that we got right into hard drives, so I kind of thought, well, let's just finish the hard drives and then we'll go back to CF cards.
Okay. A RAID drive is a, see, what is it? I forget what the letters stand for.
Okay.
It's a 2 or more drives, okay, that work as a single drive letter.
Okay.
Okay, so you have typically, the typical RAID arrays are 4 drives or 5 drives or 6 drives. 4 is a common one. So you have 4 drives in there, and to the computer they look like 1 drive. Okay, but the way they work is they take the data and they spread it around on the different drives, and they use algorithms to do this, and they have it spread around, so that at any point 1 drive can totally fail and you still have all the data.
I see.
Okay, and you can actually, that drive fails, you can pull it out, put a new one in without shutting anything down.
Okay.
And then that drive will rebuild itself, so you have your backup. Okay, just so you have all 4 running again. Now the catch is, because of the way that works, you have 4 drives in there. Well, let's say they're all 1 terabyte apiece. So you have 4 terabytes, right? But actual working capacity, you have 3 terabytes because of the way it spreads the information around.
I see.
So you always lose a drive.
Okay.
So if you have 4 drives, you're losing one. If you have 5 drives, you're still losing one.
Okay.
Now they do have RAID arrays that are 2 drives, but and then you're losing half your drives, obviously. So typically they have a 4 or a 5 number of drives in them. So you're losing one, and you don't have to worry about as much. That's nice as far as an operating way to operate with a RAID array. A big business uses RAID arrays. Their network servers are usually RAID arrays because if they have a problem, they don't have to shut the business down. I mean, they're looking more not as a backup, but as a way to run 24/7 and not have to shut the computer down, because they can just pull something out and pop it back in, and nobody even knows that they had something down.
Right.
But the problem there is the 4 drives are operating off of one. There's a mini computer inside it that's doing all this assigning. So if something goes wrong with that, or you have an electrical surge and wipes out the whole RAID, you've lost it all, you know, because you blew all 4 drives at once with a power surge, or because the thing that's the electronics that are assigning where the stuff goes corrupted or something like that. So it's not really a backup. It's more of a guarantee to run a business or whatever without interruption.
So yeah, because I don't know anybody like who uses a RAID drive. Do you?
I tried one for a while, and it was a pain in the neck.
And it's a pain in the neck. Why?
Well, it was slower because mine was hooked up via a USB 2 connection at the time, so it was much slower than the internal drives.
And then it has all that extra work to do.
It has all the extra work to do, so I was never really happy with it. I still have it. It's still sitting on the shelf, you know. But they're fine for certain kinds of businesses, but some people buy a RAID array thinking it's a backup. It isn't. It isn't, because you still have one thing that fails and there's no backup to that one thing. Okay?
I see. Okay.
So the way you back up is, the ways you can back up is either to back up on other drives, okay? And typically, a good way to do it is you have your drive in your computer, and then you have 2 backup drives, both big enough to hold all the data in the computer.
Okay.
Right? And you're backing up to both of them. And you keep one of them on site, and you keep the other one off site.
Okay.
All right?
Now who does that?
Well,
you don't do that, do you?
Well, my off site is my garage.
So you do that?
I have two, yeah.
So you take it out of your garage, what, every day?
No.
Plug it in and then plug it back out?
Once a week or so, I swap them. I take the one inside and put it in the garage, and take the other one out of the garage. So it's at the other end of the house. You know?
Okay.
So if I have a fire, I hope it's a contained fire.
Okay. You know? All right.
So I mean, that's what I do. Ideally, the thing to do would be bring it down here. And I could probably do that once a week, bring it down here and store it here, and it'd be off-site, you know.
Okay.
But they both are, so at most I would lose a week's worth of stuff.
All right, I see.
Okay, so I have two of those, but they're both 8 terabyte. And they hold all my photos, all my documents, everything else. And actually I'm using backups. I'm not just making a simple copy, I'm using backup software to do that. Okay.
All right.
And
you know what, though? I'm going to stop you because I do want to go back to the CF card, and I thought that the backup stuff will be a whole section that we need to talk about.
All right.
So we don't have a heck of a lot of time left. So let's talk about the CF cards, because we did talk about the SD cards, and a lot of people still use CF cards. A lot of the more professional cameras.
Right.
You know, a lot of Nikons use CF cards. Well, what else?
Okay, well,
do any of the Canons use CF cards anymore?
Yeah, the 5D Mark IVs and all do,
So the professional levels still use CF cards?
Well, some of them do. The one...
The higher end ones.
The top level are using newer formats that look like a CF card but are not backwards compatible.
Okay.
Okay, and there's 2 formats. First you have the regular CF cards.
Do you remember? And that stood for compact flash.
Yeah.
What does SD stand for?
SD?
Yeah.
Secure digital.
Okay.
But ironically, it was made by SanDisk, was the inventor, so it could stand for SD too. You know? But I guess if they said it's for SanDisk, nobody else would make them.
That's good. Okay.
But
Secure digital. Okay.
Yeah.
So compact flash, CF cards.
CF cards. the rating system on them is the one you want to look for on that. Again, you have the same thing with the number of megabytes a second. Okay, older cards also had a figure on them like 1000x or 600x, and again, that's the manufacturer's rating, and that was based on how many times faster it was than a CD-ROM would write.
Oh, wow.
Which was, and a
so they're comparing it to an old technology.
A CD-ROM was 150 megabytes a second.
Okay.
Okay, now so 600 times that, and you get up to 90.
But again,
80.
that's not the important number
That's
because
not
that's
the other
the
one.
main
The other
picture.
one would be, they have a thing on there, it's UDMA 1 or 7. UDMA 7 would be the faster ones.
Okay.
And they also may have a small thing on there that looks like the sound clapboard that you see in the movies. And that's the video rating, and that'll have a 30 in there or something like that.
Okay, so the biggest number that they have is the better
UDMA,
one.
Yeah, UDMA 7, and with the, you know, a high number, 95 megabytes a second or something like that would be a fast card that could be used in, you know, the Mark V or something like that, or my 7D Mark II. That's what that takes.
Okay.
It takes either one. I can either take a CF card or an SD card.
So you have 2 slots.
2 slots. Typically, I use the SDs because they're like half the price of the CF
Well,
cards.
can't you put both in there and
I can
write
put
to
both
both?
in there and write
That's
to
what
both,
I'd be
yeah.
doing.
Yeah, I write to both. It depends on what I'm doing. I mean,
now, you said there are different types of CF cards?
well, there's CF cards, and then what replaced CF cards a couple years ago, the CF Association or whatever, there were 2 types of cards that were made. There was, and they competed with each other, you know, like Betamax and VHS did with the other stuff. One was called a CFast card, CFAST, okay, and the other was XQD. XQD had Sony and Nikon behind it, and CFast had Canon and a lot of the high-end movie cameras, Arri and Black Hawk and places like that, and they had 2 different competing cards. What's happened is, and they never got into the consumer level cards, they're always in the high-end cards, and they're pretty expensive cards because their bottom ends are like 300 or 400 megabytes a second for their cheap ones. But their cheap ones are, for a 32 gig, 64 gig card, you're probably talking $150 or more. Okay, they're pretty expensive.
Okay.
So they had those 2 formats, and they've competed with each other. Nikon in their cameras has used the XQD in their high-end camera, their D series, and I think it's in the new mirrorless they brought out. I think the higher one of them, the 7, has that in it too, where Canon had the CFast card. CFast has a limitation that can't be gotten around, so the other design was really better.
Okay.
So now what they've done is they've come out with a 3rd design, which is the latest and greatest, which eventually everybody will go to, because CFast is kind of a dead end. This will replace XQD.
Okay.
That's CF Express.
CF Express.
That's not really out yet. I don't think there's any devices that use it yet, but that's what will replace XQD.
Okay.
And the nice thing about that is the device, the camera, can get a software update and work with a CF Express card.
Some cameras, right? Not all.
Well, anything that took an XQD card,
Oh, anything.
which is only a couple cameras. I
Okay,
mean, we're talking a
okay.
couple Sonys and a couple high-end Nikons. Supposedly will be compatible with the CF Express with a software update to the
But
camera.
most people are using it.
Nobody's using that.
Yeah, so let's.
If they're using a
let's-
CF card, typically they're going to be using a UDMA 7 is fine. It's what they're using.
Okay.
You know, that's what they're going to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's what to look for
Yeah.
for our customers.
Yeah, look for UDMA 7.
Okay.
And now the other ones with the XQD cards, they get around all this nonsense. They don't have any of that. They have 2 numbers on there. They tell you to read speed, they tell you to write speed.
Which is what
End
we
of
want to
story.
know in the first
Exactly.
place.
Exactly. You know, and that's fine. And apparently the CF Express is going to do the same thing. Instead of having a million numbers on there, it's just going to tell you what it is, which is what they all should have done in the first place.
I'm with you.
Yeah, so that's nice.
All right. So bottom line with the SD cards, we're going to get The U3.
Yeah.
That's the main number we're looking
That's
for.
the main number
With the
we're
CF card, the main number we're looking for is
UDMA7.
UDMA7.
Yeah.
Those are our bottom lines
That would
for
be
the
the-
cards to
yeah,
have
they would
fast
be
enough
fast.
cards.
Yeah.
And we're mostly still photographers here. So
And if it's it'll have the rating 90 megabytes a second, 95. That's a really fast card.
Okay.
That's fine. Somewhere down around 60 or 70 if you have an older camera or a beginner camera like a Rebel or a Nikon 3000, 5000 series, you could get away with 60 and be fine, even for videos.
okay. All right, so let's go back now that
Okay,
I just wanted to get that in so we didn't
no,
forget.
No, we don't want to forget
So we
that,
have a few more minutes. Let's
Okay.
finish talking about backup options
Okay.
because we were getting into it, and I think backup options are a really, really big thing. People don't know how to back up their stuff, and they say that this generation is we take more pictures than anybody, and we're not going to have any pictures because nobody's backing anything up. So what are we doing here? So we talked about...
It's scary. I mean, there's few people are really backing up, and a lot of people that think they're backing up aren't. A lot of them, the Mac users are backing up to the Time Machine, but they're not back. They think they're backing up everything, but they're not. They're only backing up certain things.
Yeah, because they knock it out the one end if it gets full, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize
yeah,
that.
you know, unless they're backing up to the iCloud thing and all that stuff.
Well, they have to pay
And
extra.
then they have to pay extra for that. But if they're just using Time Machine internally or no local drive, they're not really backing up.
Right.
You know, that's a fine. The software is fine.
Right.
But you have to recognize you need storage to back it up onto, you know, and then it'll work fine for you, right? So that's one way to do it. Again, we're talking about backing up to external hard drives.
So if you are a Mac user, does everything on the Mac automatically back up to the what'd you call it?
Time Machine.
Time Machine?
Yeah, or iCloud if it's Time Machine is for local, and then they have I think it's called iCloud.
iCloud, yeah,
that
that's
goes to
because
the,
I know my iPhone supposedly backs up there,
Yeah.
but I back it up to Dropbox because I go to iCloud and my pictures are not in there. So I'm
Well,
talking about my iPhone
yeah.
pictures. So
Well,
I
you
don't
know
think
that-
it's working.
Dropbox technically isn't a backup.
Okay.
It's a copy, okay, but it relies on you to move everything to it, you know, and if you forget to put something on it, you've forgotten to put it on it.
Right,
You know,
but
so-
I set mine up so my iPhone automatically backs up to Dropbox rather than iCloud
Okay.
because it just wasn't happening in iCloud. I don't know
That's
why,
fine.
but it
That's
just
what
wasn't.
my phone does. It goes into my Dropbox. Now, actually, I have it going into my Adobe Cloud account
Okay.
because immediately it's in Lightroom
Okay.
CC on the phone. and
Okay,
that
so
stuff.
that's for our phone.
So
We're set with a phone. You want to set it up to back up to either iCloud or Dropbox or Adobe.
yeah, you know, Adobe, something like that. You know, if you have an Adobe
And it's usually in the
subscription-
settings somewhere,
yeah, if
right?
you have an Adobe subscription, you can go into your Lightroom CC on the phone and tell it what to do. And
Now, if you
do
have to do it through Lightroom.
yeah,
So if you have an Adobe subscription, you have to make sure you download Lightroom to your phone. Like I don't have Lightroom on my phone.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You should, because you're missing out on. Let's get a little bit off the track, but you're missing out a lot with that subscription. If you have the photographer's package, you have Lightroom Classic CC for your desktop. Okay, you have Lightroom CC for the cloud, and that's either the Lightroom CC can either be on a laptop or it can be on a tablet or a phone, right?
Right.
And they can interchange with each other. So the way I'm set up, I take the picture, it's on my Lightroom Classic at home. Bang, it's right there.
You mean you take an iPhone picture, or you don't have an iPhone, it's a cell phone
It's
picture,
a cell phone picture, right?
and it automatically backs up into
It-
your
it
Lightroom
automa- it
on the
It
computer.
automatically puts it into the Adobe Cloud service and puts it on my computer.
Into your cat. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now I don't do a lot of that, so I just have the minimum. I think you get 20 gigabytes that comes with the subscription. All right, but that's 20 gigabytes of stuff you're taking pictures of with your cell phone, so that's a lot of pictures.
Yeah.
Right. The stuff you're moving the other way from your Classic CC, that you're putting into so you can look at it on your phone or tablet, that doesn't count against your subscription for whatever reason.
Oh,
Don't ask me why, but
yeah,
it doesn't. But I'm not going to. I was going to write to Adobe and complain about that.
All right, so let's, because we're running out of time,
well,
so now let's talk about
backup software. There's two ways you can back up. You can have software on your computer, like Acronis is one. That's the one I use.
What's it? How do you say that?
Acronis. I might not be pronouncing it. Acronis.
Okay.
They have versions for Mac and for Windows.
And that's a backup software?
It's backup software.
And what does it do? Where does it go to?
You put that on your computer and you set it up where you want to back up to, what you want to back up, and what schedule you want.
All right. So
and it just does it automatically.
All right. And you're backing up to the cloud?
No, you're backing up to
another hard drive.
You can with Acronis. They also have a cloud service for so much a month where you can back up to the cloud in addition or instead or whatever. I don't back up to the cloud. I just do it to my external hard drives.
And why don't you back up to the cloud?
I'm not crazy about cloud backup because it takes, I have so much stuff, but putting it up and down the pipe, and then if I needed it, I mean, if I had a hard drive failure and needed the whole thing, how long is it going to take me to download, a couple terabytes of stuff?
Well, I don't know about the downloading, but the uploading is the reason that I'm not backing up to the cloud. Because in my company, we have a big, I mean, Understand Photography is one of my companies, but with my portrait and event photography, we take 3,000-4,000 pictures a week. And they're raw files.
Yeah.
There are three of us working, and I could never, it just slowed my computer down so bad when I tried to back up to the cloud.
That's it. And if you had it downloaded, it'd take forever. Now, some of these services, if you had a total failure, they will, for a fee, send you a hard drive with all the data on it for you to transfer over. Because to download that from the cloud would take you forever, with the download speeds.
But I do the same as you. As I back up everything up on a detachable hard drive, but not the same way that you do. I back up my pictures. I don't even put my pictures on my main computer. They don't even go on my main computer. They go directly to a detachable hard drive. But then every single event, like if I have a job, or like we went out shooting the other night, that you already have all your pictures done. But anyway,
I did one picture so I could get it up. The rest I haven't looked at.
But those will go also on a DVD.
Yeah.
And people say, oh, DVDs are going to fail, but they have never failed on me yet. And I've got DVDs up there since 2001.
But in theory they do, because the dye can go on them, and then they do fail.
I have a lot more hard drives fail on me than DVD. I've never had a DVD file, and I have had lots of hard drives fail.
I've had some CDs I haven't been able to read.
CDs or DVDs?
Oh, CDs. But it's the same technology, basically, But I had CDs I couldn't read. I didn't really do much DVD storage, but everything changes with that. But anyway, the cloud services, Carbonite's one that a lot of people use, and there's other ones. And that's a nice way if you don't have a lot of stuff, you're shuffling back and forth.
And Carbonite was the one that I tried. But it just hung my whole computer up forever.
Well, I like doing it, and I can control. I can change my schedule. Now, I have it backing up my entire computer, which is multiple drives. And I have it backing the whole thing up to both 8 terabyte drives. And the way that does that, there's a master backup, and then it adds to that anything new I have. So it doesn't have to move everything every week. It's only adding to it and making corrections.
Okay, I see, right.
And I can change that, and then every so often I can have it start fresh again and build a new one.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a nice way to do it because it's faster. You can move right through it, and it's quicker, and it's reliable. And I've done it that way for a long time, and it's worked fine for me. The nice thing about that is if I have a total drive failure or something else, I can put a new drive in the computer, boot it up with the software they give you, plug the drive in, and it'll just bring everything over, and it'll be just like I left it.
Okay.
I don't have to do any adding or changing passwords. It's just done.
So is that what you recommend for people to do?
Yeah. And I've done that with a laptop where I've actually had to do that and plugged it in and do
it does your programs and everything?
Yeah, everything. In other words, it's storing everything on the computer and everything. It's even restoring my hidden drives on the computer that the manufacturer puts on there with their boot system and all that stuff. It just
Now,
does
what
everything.
about like if somebody in my case where I have, I go through a 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive every 3 or 4 months.
Really, you're probably better off just making copies of them.
Doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Having 2 backups.
But you can use software like this to do that for you too.
Right, right.
You can have that automate that process and tell it to make an exact mirror image, and it'll do that for you.
Well, as you know, my hard drive did crash. My main computer, my hard drive crashed, about 2-3 weeks ago. And it didn't really affect me that badly. I mean, the worst part was that I had to reinstall all the programs. But nowadays, that's a lot easier to do because I don't lose the discs because you download.
Yeah.
Because I used to I don't know where the disc is, So I had to download all the programs again and reinstall them. And then a lot of my, of course, God knows, I got password sheets, but the passwords were a big trouble too. But I barely store anything on my main computer. I just put the programs on there, but my pictures are on a different hard drive. My documents all are in Dropbox. So it didn't really affect, the hardest part was after it was all fixed. To download everything back to the computer took over like a week and a half.
Well, that's the nice
of
thing
my
about
computer
these,
working forever.
These restore the whole work, so you're not.
So you don't have to wait for so long.
They're not just saving your pictures and your documents. They're saving
the
whole computer, so you don't have to worry about passwords and that. Somebody recently I just read on one of the forums, somebody's trying to figure out what they could do. I don't remember what program they had. They had some editing program, and the outfit that made it had gone out of business. And their verification was, you had it phone their server to get the whatever it needed. Well, that wasn't there anymore. So even though he had a legitimate copy, when he installed it on the new computer, it couldn't phone home to verify ownership. So the program is useless. So he was looking if there was a way to get around that, because it didn't have the server.
All right, so let's wrap that up. So the best way to back up your photos, or you're saying your whole computer, is?
For me, it's to use good quality backup software and back it up to an external drive. Ideally, you back it up to 2 external drives, one you keep off-site and one you keep off-site.
Okay.
But at least back it up to 1, which is what most people are going to do. That way you have a full backup.
Okay. All right, Joe Fitzpatrick, now you have been going crazy. You have a new website, and you're big on Instagram, right? Just started your Instagram.
Yeah, 3 days or 4 days.
And what's your Instagram handle?
My Instagram handle is Joe Fitzpatrick Photo.
Okay.
And that's actually the same, that's my website too, is joefitzpatrickphoto.com.
Okay, and you made that website with Adobe.
I used the Adobe program for that.
That came with the photographer's program.
Part of the photographer's program.
Maybe we'll talk about that next show.
It was pretty cool. I had been using Zenfolio for a long time.
You know what? We'll do a show on websites.
Okay. Yeah.
Sound like a plan?
I like that. Yeah. The Adobe was
good job.
Great. Okay.
All right. Thank you, Joe Fitzpatrick. I'm Peggy Farren. Thanks for watching the Understand Photography Show. We'll see you next week.
Get up!